Allen Lund Company wishes all the owner-operators out there a Happy New Year. OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
One of President Trump's first moves upon returning to the Oval Office was to order a regulatory freeze on all pending rules and regulations. Mark Schremer of Landline Magazine joined Scott Thompson to discuss what proposed rules for the trucking industry are affected. For some time, we've talked about the high costs of predatory towing, but regular towing isn't cheap for truckers, and some say it's getting even worse. Tom Crowley and Aaron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department explain. Traffic congestion isn't just annoying, it's also very costly, and it's never been worse, according to a new report from the American Transportation Research Institute. Jeffrey Short, ATRI's vice president, explains how congestion is affecting you and everyone else on the road. And finally, there's lots of optimism concerning the year ahead for the spot market. Brent Hutto of Truck Stop says he's hearing good things about rates. We'll take a closer look at those and more. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. One of President Trump's first acts upon returning to the Oval Office was to order a regulatory freeze across the board, meaning any pending rule not in effect is being reviewed. The move has led to some confusion. So what does it mean for the trucking industry? Here with answers is Mark Schremer, senior editor of Landline Magazine. Mark, always good to see you.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So broadly speaking here, what we're talking about, again, is a freeze that basically forces a review of all rules and regulations that are not yet in effect. This is separate from another freeze on federal grants and loans, which is a subject of legal action. This one we're talking about today, though, just across the board, it's a pause, essentially, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of a pause in three different ways, mainly. So it's putting a pause and a stop on agencies proposing or implementing any new rules. It also, if it hasn't published in the Federal Register yet, we'll put a pause and stop on that, a delay. And if it has published in the Federal Register but yet not taken effect, then creates a 60-day delay, and then an opportunity for the agencies to either ask for additional comments or even delay the rule further if they believe there's reason to do so. So it really is putting a lot of the government regulatory process to a halt for a little bit. A regulatory free sounds like a fun game, doesn't it?
Sure. Why not? Yeah. Yeah. And it is, it is literally a freeze. And right now, all those things are being placed under consideration, under a microscope. We could obviously spend all day, I think, talking about the impact of all this or what it might mean here. But let's hone in on what it means or what it could mean, I suppose, for trucking industry rules and regulations. I know you have been kind of focused on automatic emergency braking. That's kind of the one that stands out most here, I think, at present time, right?
Yeah, because just this week, so there was the overall regulatory freeze, but then in this instance, NHTSA, it wasn't for trucks, they had issued a final rule mandating automatic emergency braking systems on new vehicles, light vehicles, 10,000 pounds or less. And if you remember, they had proposed one for heavy-duty trucks. Considering on the light-duty rule, it did make it to the finish line. It had published in the Federal Register, yet it had not taken effect. So what's in the Federal Register this week now is a 60-day delay. Like what I was talking about, those three different ways of doing it, this is the third one. It's going to give a 60-day pause, so now it would not take effect until March 20th, but we don't know what's going to happen there. We just have a new Department of Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, has just been confirmed. We don't even have, NHTSA administrator or FMCSA administrator, so we don't know exactly what's going to happen there. But we do have a pause on that. with the heavy duty one, which is obviously going to be more interest to our readers, that one, final rule was never published. There was a proposal for that to happen to mandate. There was a lot of opposition from truckers out there on that rule. That did not have a final rule published. So that really is putting that to a halt for now. And it's one of those that we may not see anything on it, because I think there's some indication that maybe this isn't something the Trump administration is going to be as big on pursuing.
Yeah, and that's what this freeze is going to essentially accomplish, I guess, on a number of, in a number of ways, is it is going to lead to changes of position, and some of these things will kind of fold away here. The automatic emergency braking issue is kind of the one I think at front of mind here. But when we're looking at other things that are kind of pending out there, is anything else popping out to you as maybe being something that could fall by the wayside, or could maybe fall into a category of gone and forgotten, I guess?
Yeah, I think the things kind of regulatory for automated driving systems and autonomous vehicles, some of the regulations there, that's another one that has a pause on it for the moment. If you take, it's not just for truckers, but there is Health and Human Services had a hair testing that had been sitting at White House OMB review for, I think, nearly like 2 years, and that has just been pulled after 2 years sitting there. So that's another one that you look at and you think that and that's OIDA had a lot of concerns about that, the quality of the testing, all of those things, and I think this is one that might be pulled back as well. One thing that I do want to bring up on this, I know with President Trump, there's always a lot of attention with all these executive orders and the regulatory freeze, but a lot of this, every time there's a new administration, it isn't that uncommon for them to put a pause on things, because you had a previous completely separate group of people that were working on all of these things, and we have new people in place coming through. It does make sense to put a pause on some of these, and let's now have our new people, new leadership review these and see if we agree that these are being done exactly the way they should be carried out. Sometimes it might just be amendments to those proposals or rules, or sometimes it might be completely removing them.
Yeah, transitions of administrations, obviously that's a heavy lift. There's a lot of rules and regulations out there that have been proposed and that are in effect, and it takes a while for everybody to get back up to speed. But we'll see where all this where all this lands. It never a dull moment, I suppose, is the right way to put this, Mark, and we know you'll keep on top of it.
Yep.
We thank Mark Schirmer for his time there. One more item before we turn the page here regarding Sean Duffy's confirmation by the Senate to lead the Department of Transportation. Shortly after being sworn in by Justice Clarence Thomas, Duffy carried out his first move as Secretary, ordering an immediate review of existing fuel economy standards. The memorandum takes aim at corporate average fuel economy standards. The goal is to lower vehicle prices and eliminate efforts on the federal level to encourage electric vehicle sales. For Landline Now, I'm Scott Thompson. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. OOIDA is accepting applications for the OOIDA Mary Johnston Scholarship. You can find more information or apply at ooida.com. Go to the main menu at the top left of the page, and under Foundation, click on Scholarship Program. The deadline is February 1st. Next, Tom Crowley and Aaron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department join us to discuss the high cost of towing. And Jeffrey Short of ATRI tells us what his group's study of traffic congestion says about where things stand. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
At Truck Stop, we've built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. For some time, we've talked about the high costs of predatory towing, and some of those bills are outrageous. But regular towing isn't cheap for truck drivers, and some say it's getting even worse. Here to discuss that and more are Tom Crowley and Aaron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Thanks as always, Mark. Glad to be here.
Oh, well, this is a deep topic. This is one that's really hit a lot of people, and there really are two separate things, predatory towing and just big towing bills. I want to kind of dispense, first of all, with the predatory towing and just note, I mean, some of these bills, how big do they get? Because I've heard some amazing figures.
Oh, yeah, they really get, when you go with the predatory or non-consensual tow, where you don't have a choice, whether your truck is broke down, you was in a crash, something like this.
They're digging you out of a ditch.
I mean, you don't have a choice in the matter. The cops or somebody calls in the tow company, whoever's on the rotation. Some of these bills are astronomical. I mean, I've seen situations where they will send out several rotators, a crew of people for a job, and some of this equipment sits on the job site or sits on the tow site for hours, but never gets used. But you get charged for it.
And let's put numbers to it, right? 20, 30, 40,000 is what we're talking about. Yeah. In some cases, there's been a few that's more.
Yeah. I have heard some of them that are in that upper range there. And that's pretty much the end of your business if you actually get stuck with that bill.
Oh, yeah. Not only that, I mean, because your tow part of your insurance policy is only going to cover a certain part of it, whatever you're paying for there. But they take your equipment, and you don't get your equipment back until this bill is paid. And if it's a bill that you just financially cannot pay, you're probably going to lose your equipment.
And that's on top of already having the downtime that's going to be accrued for not having the equipment, and then waiting for insurance to figure out all those, all that minutia.
Now, that's predatory towing, where basically there's a wreck, the police call the towing service, you don't have a choice with who you're going with. They take advantage of that. But there's also the case where you are calling the towing service to get your truck moved. And I hadn't heard lately about those bills getting out of control. How much are they going up? What are you hearing from people?
Well, I mean, and on that, you do have a little bit more control over it. You can talk to the tow company. I recently had to have a truck towed, and you can talk to them, and depending on how busy they are, they'll maybe work with you a little bit. But just to hook a truck, just for a tow company to come out and hook a truck, they're probably going to charge you, $500 just to hook the truck, and then a per mileage fee depending on where you're going. Now, like I said,
or some charge even per hour.
Yeah, if it's that type of a job. But when you call the tow company, at least at that point you have some discretion in who you call and what the charge is going to be. I mean, I was able to, when I had to have my truck towed here not too long ago, I was able to have a discussion with them before they ever showed up on approximately what it would be. Now that's if nothing goes bad along the way. I mean, there's always unforeseen circumstances can happen. But it was approximately what it was going to be. But it's still, I mean, just to have a truck towed 20 miles, costs, almost $1,500.
Well, and a lot of it's not necessarily predatory, but what you got to watch out for, what I see, I had one this morning that I had a guy, he called because he was on the roadside, and he looked them up, and of course they were on the top of Google. They were a sponsored link, come to find out. So their name was one thing, and they called and negotiated a price that it was going to be about $400 or $500. And they came out, and it was a totally different company on the side of the truck. It wasn't who we called. It was someone else. It was a totally different company. And they said, well, yeah, it was still going to be the same price. They hooked it up. They drove them all the way there. And once they got to the place, they said, we'll impound it. It's going to be $1,300, not $500 now.
Yeah.
And we want, and they want cash a lot of times. So that's something you got to watch. Don't look at all these sponsored links, whoever pops on the top of Google, because they pay to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really, folks, if you aren't familiar with this, very often those first few links that you come up with on Google when you Google something, you'll look up and right above it, it'll say sponsored. Keep going down till you get past. You get the first one that is not sponsored.
Yeah, and there could be 3 or 4 of them that are sponsored.
Yep.
And that's something that took me a little while to kind of to get the fact that wow, I'm being sold here. And you do you put in for what you're searching for. Definitely scroll down past all of what's selling there. It just there's other directions.
Yeah, because more than likely that was just a dispatching service, and they're going to get their little cut, and then the actual company itself, and now they got an extra $800 of you, and they got the truck up in the air, and they're not going to release it, or they're threatening to impound it, and you need it.
Yep.
Yep, sure enough.
Well, let's talk about when you're in a conflict with a towing service over the price, whether it's predatory or whether it's just a situation like you describe, Aaron, with a regular tow. A lot of folks have towing insurance. They have bought a rider onto their policy that covers towing. In a case like that, is it best to basically contact the insurance, tell them what's going on, and let them try and handle it with that towing service?
I mean, a lot of your insurances, they still leave it up to you to contact the tow service. And especially like if you have a breakdown tow and you have breakdown insurance, people don't realize, though, that is usually from the point of breakdown to the closest repair facility. And somebody will say, well, I want you to tow me from where I broke down at to this dealership or a specific place I want to go, or tow it home or something. Be careful with your policy, because that may not be covered that way. It may be, most of them are actually just towed to the nearest facility, and you don't get a lot of choice in that. And you can't have them tow it all the way home, 2,000 miles or something. It's just not going to work for you.
And Mark, I would beg to differ on the way we worded that. I don't think a lot of these guys have towing coverage or towing insurance.
Really?
Because a lot of times it's sold separately and it's in addition to. And a lot of them opt not to do that because that's an added cost already to a premium. So I would say that I don't think a lot of people do have it.
Or if they do, it just doesn't cover as much as they think it shall. Towing is expensive, and it doesn't take long to eat up a $5,000 tow policy or whatever, whatever your maximum limits are for that.
Yeah, and it's not that costly, as I recall, to get the towing coverage. I mean, in comparison with your overall policy, is it really a good idea to have that?
I mean, I think it's a good idea to have that, but with this as difficult as it is out there in the industry, people are always looking to,
Cut corners,
shave costs. I mean, insurance is, by and far a very big part of your expenses for your company. And so, people do look to shave stuff, and sometimes they shave it in places they shouldn't. But it's trucking is tough. I mean, like they say, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
Well, let's go to the opposite case. For those who don't have towing insurance and you're stuck with one of these huge bills, how do you proceed? What steps should you take to deal with that?
Well, I mean, situations when we talk to folks that are in this deal, are usually pretty dire. Usually their equipment is impounded. It's sitting on a tow lot. It's accruing, per day storage fees and stuff like this. So, the first thing you would want to do is, if at all possible, is definitely get with your insurance company, find out what they can do to help you. Because you have cargo insurance, you have maybe a tow policy. There's different type of insurances that may be able to help with this. If you have, it just gets it's harsh. I would say definitely get with your insurance company and see, and then you may have to start negotiating with the insurance or with the tow company to see what they'll do. Some of them are reasonable and will work with you a little bit. Some of them are pretty harsh, and this is what it is, and they want paid, and until they get paid, you don't get your equipment, you don't get your load, all kinds of stuff, and that can really go bad for a small carrier.
That's another thing, Aaron. You mentioned Google reviews before, but this may be a case where you want to go ahead and look up the Google reviews on a towing company, see if someone's had problems, and frankly, probably not a bad idea to put your own review up and describe your experience once you've had that.
Oh, of course, I agree. And to kind of add to what Tom said, I find it very hard to give ideas to these actual issues, because there's just it's not a one size fits all answer. It's all situational. And a lot of times, like Tom said, they are dire situations, but there's not a lot of rules or regulations or legislation in place that protect you. So sometimes you do have to file some complaints. And yes, we would love to see some bills or legislation passed in regards to some of that. But what it comes down to is what oversight committee or who oversees that specific county a lot of times. And they have their own mandates.
And like you said, Aaron, there's not a lot of oversight in this area. There's a lot of cowboys out there, a lot of folks that maybe are riding the edge of what's at least what's moral, if not what's legal, on these tow companies, and they are gouging. Some of them will definitely gouge you. I mean, we spoke at the beginning of the show about some of the higher costs, and some of these costs just get astronomical. Well, they'll outweigh the cost of your equipment, and it'll end up costing you your equipment.
Yeah, and you find out that you can't call DOT to fix the issue. You can try to call the cops. It's very situational. A lot of times they won't be of any service to you. Yeah. You may need to talk to an attorney in that specific area, keep in mind. And if you're down your truck, if you've had a wreck, if you have any downtime, now you have to pay for an attorney. A lot of times you don't have that.
Yeah. And that's something we should note here. And we always sound like we're kind of pounding away at these folks, but there are very good towing companies out there. There are people who are committed to doing it right, to providing the good customer service. It's just that it seems to be
there's enough of the bad actors out there.
And if you're doing things right, a lot of times you don't get noticed. You don't get talked about. Because you're just doing it right. So,
exactly.
Then nobody says something. But you mentioned the reviews. Definitely check reviews. Always try to find out what other people have to say about them and do your part and throw your review out there, most definitely.
Is this just something that's happening in particular parts of the country, or is this something that really is a broader nationwide problem right now?
Well, I think there's a problem across the industry, but there are definitely pockets.
There's hot spots for
and
sure.
areas that and it's where some of these outliers take advantage of the system or the lack of infrastructure, lack of regulation over the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are some states. I know that there's a bill to do some towing reform here in Missouri. We know other states that have taken on some towing reform, but they're really focused on the predatory side.
Well, and because those are the ones that really get you, and OIDA has done a lot and tried to bring this to the forefront in a lot of states, but it is a state-by-state issue. There's no federal law that covers this. It is a jurisdiction-by-jurisdiction issue.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you very much for all the information, and hopefully we helped some folks.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Thanks as always, Mark. Glad to be here.
I've been talking with Tom Crowley and Aaron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department. And folks, of course, if you have questions about towing insurance, call OOIDA's Insurance Department. They can give you some advice on that. The number is 816-229-5791. Again, that phone number, 816-229-5791. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit CapitalReman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
Landline Now, welcome back. Traffic congestion isn't just annoying, although it's definitely that. It's also a time suck and a gigantic waste of money. And it's never been worse, according to a new report from the American Transportation Research Institute, which found that traffic congestion on U.S. highways added nearly $109 billion in costs to the trucking industry in 2022. Joining us with the details, Jeffrey Short, ATRI's Vice President. Jeffrey, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
So we got a lot of ground to cover here with this report, and I think it uncovers a lot of questions and a lot of interesting aspects of this topic here. But let's start with the study itself. Can you tell me just a little bit about why ATRI looks at congestion costs in particular?
Well, congestion obviously is a very frustrating thing for everyone who uses the roadways, especially in urban areas. For a truck driver, it may not be your origin, might not be your destination, but if you're going through a major city during rush hour in particular, you're likely going to experience some congestion, and that congestion can really eat into the bottom line. It takes away available hours of service. It could make parking more difficult if there's some level of uncertainty involved with the congestion, and it's just a very costly problem, as our report showed. So as background, this is ongoing research that we have on the cost of congestion. Our most recent update here is for the year 2022. That's because of when data is released from the federal government in particular on volumes. That's one component that we need. So the cost of congestion right now stands at more than $108 billion. This is the highest it's ever been since we've been doing this. Our first study was in 2012. ATRI's Research Advisory Committee back in 2012 ranked measuring the cost of congestion, doing an ongoing analysis of congestion costs as a top research priority, and we've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, let's start with that big number that you mentioned there. Basically, I'll round up to $109 billion. That's what you found, the amount of money that is costing the trucking industry back in 2022. $109 billion, when we look at a big number like that, it can be kind of hard to put it into context. But how did you come up with that figure exactly? Talk about, everything that you factored in to get to that number.
So what we do is we look at the entire roadway system in the U.S. We started back in 2012 through 2016 looking at every single roadway segment in the U.S., and we've since indexed through that the speeds, the number of trucks impacted, and the trucking industry costs overall per mile and per hour. So we focus in on those segments of roadway where speeds are going below 55 miles per hour. And we look at those speeds on segments of roadway by hour of day of week, so that we're ultimately calculating up how much time is spent with lower speeds. Then we look at the number of trucks impacted, and that's through volume data that we go out there and collect from various sources, one of which is the Federal Highway Administration. So once we know how many trucks are impacted at each location and what speed levels they are being brought down to, we can then measure the congestion. Once you have a congestion measurement, you then go to the trucking industry costs. And the cost to operate a truck per hour has certainly gone up, especially since 2020. We've seen a lot of inflation. And hence, we had costs in 2020, congestion costs it was around $77 billion. And it has gone up all the way to $108 billion by 2022. Of course, COVID played a role in 2020 in the lower congestion costs, but still, this is a massive increase in cost to the industry over just 2 years.
Yeah, it's a really big jump. And what I found interesting, among other things in this report, you found that people are actually spending fewer hours in traffic The average speeds and bottlenecks were up very slightly, but still up. So when we see congestion costs going up, is it mostly due to the operational costs that truck drivers are seeing out there and battling with?
That is the biggest piece of this puzzle, certainly. The cost of trucks has gone up, the cost of tires, the cost of fuel in 2022 was at a peak, and that certainly influenced it. And the cost of a driver's time. Drivers are certainly earning more money than they were prior to COVID, and that factors into it absolutely, as well as, cost of benefits, health benefits for drivers. Just overall, we've seen increases across the board for operational costs.
Yeah, and what you found on an individual basis, again, I think $109 billion can be kind of hard to put into context, but for each individual driver out there, you figured it's about $7,500 more they're paying per truck due to congestion. Is that fair to say? Basically, $7,500 is the cost of of doing business in traffic. Is that kind of safe to say?
That is correct. It's $7,500 that is wasted every year stuck in congestion. That's money that could be earned. That's money that's lost with, let's say, fuel. You're just sitting there burning fuel in stop-and-go traffic. That fuel at 55 miles per hour, it would be much more economical, if you will, to move freight at 55 miles per hour than just sitting there and getting terrible gas mileage, fuel economy.
Yeah. And another reason we've seen a lot of people just sit, basically not work because it's not worth it. And I think this kind of speaks to that as well. On an individual level, obviously, that is a huge burden, $7,500 in extra expenses due to congestion. But your study also looked at the wider implications for the entire economy. As we know, everything is connected here. And when you looked at that, when you looked at congestion and the economy at large, what did you find?
Well, for the economy overall, how many hours of delay did we experience? That was almost 1.2 billion. And looking at 1.2 billion hours of delay, that works out to be about 435,000 truck drivers just sitting idle for an entire year. So that in itself is just very interesting to think about. Across the entire driver population, that's how many drivers are literally would be sitting there doing nothing for an entire year. Certainly that delay is spread across many, many more drivers, but it speaks to the difficulty of this problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. ATRI is so focused on solutions, which is one of the many great things that your institute does. On this particular issue, I'm not sure anybody has the answers about what to do about congestion. But I guess my question is, what now? What do you hope people do with this information from this report? Can it maybe contribute to finding solutions to traffic congestion and everything that comes along with it?
I think this highlights the need for investment in infrastructure. Obviously, the nation's highways are where the trucking industry does its business. These highways are out there to facilitate the efficient movement of freight from warehouses to manufacturers, from farms to markets. And when traffic volumes across these freight corridors go beyond the highway capacity, obviously there's an issue, and we need more capacity. Looking back, we started building the interstate system back in the 1950s. It was a great idea. It has certainly worked out from an economic perspective, but the system hasn't continued to grow since the 1950s. The U.S. population has increased several times over. There's far more economic activity, many times over more economic activity, but interstate capacity, you look at some cities out there that have grown and grown and grown, but we're still looking at 1950s, 1960s infrastructure. That really needs to change. The infrastructure needs to be modernized to facilitate it, in particular, the movement of freight, which is so critical to the economy. At the same time, there are even efforts to stop the improvement of existing highway infrastructure, which works counter to the argument that we should be making infrastructure better. There are folks who are protesting against highway infrastructure improvements on Interstate 80 in California, Interstate 5 in Oregon. They're saying, we should not improve these roadways. We should not put money into improving these bottlenecks. And there are even efforts out there to just remove sections of the interstate system altogether, which, in my opinion, degrades the system overall. You look at Minnesota, there's discussion of removing portions of I-94 in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and New York State up in Syracuse, removal of Interstate 81. Now, we have the majority of miles traveled by truck on the interstate system. 57% of truck miles are driven on the interstate system. That's simply because trucks operate better. They're more efficient. They can move more miles when there isn't, let's say, stoplights, right turns, left turns. The highway system is critical to moving freight efficiently. The highway system just needs to have enough lanes, needs to take care of those bottlenecks. We need to put money into the system to make it better.
Yeah, for sure. Jeffrey, I've run out of questions. Anything I forgot to ask you or anything else maybe that jumps out to you about the report that you want people to know about?
Well, I definitely would emphasize that the majority of this congestion is in urban areas. These are places where goods are going to, where they're coming from. These are the big distribution points for goods in the U.S. And certainly there's an emphasis out there, at least across the past half decade, maybe full decade, on moving away from cars, moving away from trucks, and focusing on, let's say, bicycle lanes and that sort of thing. But in reality, if you want to have food on the table, you need to facilitate the movement of trucks. And slowing it down with bottlenecks, that only leads to increased costs, less fuel efficiency, etc.
Yeah, well said. Jeffrey, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon when the next report comes out, and take care.
All right, great. Thanks, Scott.
That was Jeffrey Short of the American Transportation Research Institute, and we thank him for his time. If you'd like to check out the Institute's full cost of congestion to the trucking industry report, you can do that on ATRI's website, truckingresearch.org. There's a whole host of other research there that you might find helpful or interesting as a professional truck driver. Again, that website is truckingresearch.org. Time now for a break, but don't go far. We've got more Landline Now right around the corner, so stick around.
Running on ultra-low sulfur diesel? Stay protected this winter with Howe's Diesel Treat and Diesel Lifeline. Steer clear of gel and ice with North America's #1 trusted brand. Find Howe's products nationwide at select retailers, auto parts stores, truck stops, and on Amazon.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. If you're hauling freight and running your own business, you need to keep track of some basic facts and figures that can determine whether you succeed or fail. And that includes finding the freight and how much money you can make hauling it. Today, Landline Now's Ashley Blackford will bring us some of that information and get some insight as to why things are happening with the folks from truckstop.com. Here's Ashley now with a report.
Thanks, Mark, and hello to Brent Hutto with Truck Stop. Brent, you always start with a song, and this week, I will say, is not one I've ever heard of.
Well, I tell you what, the Doobie Brothers are classic. I mean, every trucker knows the Doobie Brothers, and so "Rockin' Down the Highway" is just a super cool song. I like it because, truckers go down the highway and everything, but I just love it because trucking keeps rocking down the highway. No matter what, trucking keeps moving down the highway. That's why they need great groups like OIDA to help them and communicate with them. And so the idea is that the reason I chose the song is that I recently was down at a conference in West Palm Beach last week, and this is where all sort of like the investors in the market are and everything, and then there's a lot of technology companies, and then a lot of the major fleets and major brokerage companies are there, and they were the reason I'm bringing it up is that there was a lot of optimism among what's going to happen inside of this marketplace. And the thing that got me so excited, Ashley, so excited for owner-operators was this. So in 2024, rates in the spot market went up about 16%. Well, that sounds good until you realize they were down about 30 or 35%. So, but here's the thing. From all the estimation, the people the economists and the people look at this say that the rates in the spot market should go up another 30% this year. And that's really good for owner-operators' pocketbook. But the optimism is that, but the other optimism is that there's more people that want to invest money into this marketplace. And when there's people that want to invest money, people that have money, and I mean like billions of dollars, when they want to like take their money and put it in the marketplace, they've done a lot of research on whether or not they think it's going to do well. And so that's what got me excited about things, because when they're excited, it means the participants in this marketplace, especially the owner operators that you love and that I love, are going to do better. And so the conditions that I look at, the marketplace is kind of just adjusting normally. Rates were about 228, but remember that's just a marker in the market. Every lane is unique. You got to negotiate in every lane. Van was about 210, flatbed was at 228, refrigerator was at 247. They're kind of moving up and down, normal with the marketplace. Fuel did go up a little bit. Load availability was down a little bit over the 5-year, but that's just normal for where we are in January, because all of the bids that go out for all the contract freight are still kind of being settled. So the marketplace is kind of still just figuring things out. But the thing that's exciting, on top of that optimism I talked about when I was down at that event, the thing that's exciting is that the contract freight that is measured by in the marketplace that would be coming into the spot market continues to stay above normal. In other words, remember I say this term, it's called the outbound tender reject index, and that's the contract freight that's not being moved under the contract that was agreed to by the bigger fleets that are out there. And that's good for owner operators, because when it's above 5%, Ash, more of it comes into the spot market. When we get more freight in the spot market, rates will go up. And so what you're going to see all year long is rates continue to move up over time. They're going to go up a couple of weeks, down a week, up a week. And so just remember, but the goal is, the hope is that we're going to get better rates all year long for owner operators, which means more profitability in their pocket. And as our new administration hopefully can kind of continue to move inflation, can get better controls on inflation, then that's better profitability for owner operators. And that's why I'm excited. That's why I put Rockin' Down the Highway, because, man, I think this year's going to be a good opportunity for trucks to keep rocking down the highway.
Good. Let's take a look at some of the top regions and lanes from last week.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so not a whole lot of changes in that, just because, like I said, things are continuing to level out. And but so load availability went. It's always going to be a positive through the holidays and then the first few weeks of January, and then it's going to come back down to normal. So you're going to see decreases, but it's just normal, the amount of freight that's available for owner operators in the spot market. And then rates in general moved down just a little bit, so they're going to look at it. But overall, they're indexing to be more positive. And what I mean by indexing is that over time they're continuing to move up. But what's kind of unique to me is I was looking at some of the lanes that you and I have talked about Texas for month over month now, as you and I have been talking about this. Well, I'm starting to see some changes in the van. So the one biggest change in van right now was Chicago to Denver. So that's not Texas. Neither one of those are Texas. So that's really good. So it went up 17% week over week in that lane for that load. And then Los Angeles to Houston, that's back to Texas, obviously, but that's out of West Coast, so that's what I was talking about. So then you got some Laredo to Atlanta. My point is it's not just Texas, but so I'm seeing some changes in this, which is probably good as things balance out. Flatbed, same thing. You see some Texas stuff, but you're seeing some other changes. Denver to Albuquerque, so Chicago to Denver. So you're starting to see some of those power lanes come back into the top pods. And what I mean by this is these are the lanes that had the biggest increase in rate, right? So I'll give you an idea. Chicago to Denver had a 20% increase. It went from 241 to 289. That's an excellent thing in the flatbed. So my point is you kind of keep looking at those areas, and then same thing in refrigerated. Portland to Los Angeles, obviously some things going in probably to help what's going on there, but different things that continue to put position around that show some changes in the market, and that's good where Texas doesn't continue to be the dominant market.
Now, you always have some good advice for our listeners. What do you got this week?
Well, I got a couple of really good ones. Number one, I want to kind of go back to what we talked about the outbound tender reject index. And so in the economic world, actually, they use words like tailwind or headwind, because they, is the wind pushing you or is it resisting you? So we're going to have, and so so if you're an owner operator out there, I want you to think about tailwinds. In other words, what's helping this marketplace to maybe be easier for you. And so watch the outbound tender reject index in different marketplaces. And you can get this on Freight Waves, and they put out this information every single week. And so just take a look at it. I know that there's a couple of different marketplaces. Dallas, still very positive, almost 7.5% rejections in there, which means there's more freight for the spot market. Even LA was above 7%, which is kind of actually it went from 7 to about 4, but most of that's just kind of what's going on. My point about this is that just keep looking for things that are going to kind of continue to create more positive rate environment for spot loads, but you're going to have to pay attention to the data. And the second thing actually is that look, I love owner operators, and I worked for Overdrive magazine back before I came to Truck Stop. And so I always loved every year when they chose their owner-operator of the year. And it was always an owner-operator that was just like obviously a person you love to hear their story. And the guy that won it this year is a guy named Alan Kitzhaber, and he's a lifelong trucker. He's been an owner-operator. He's been an independent owner-operator for several decades. And but he talked about, do you really want to be an owner-operator? And his point was, it's about your mindset. Do you really want to run a business? And because it's not about driving a truck, it's about, do you want to run a business? He talks about the mindset. He said one of the best things you can do, and this is what kind of fired me up. And he said two things. He said, number one, you have to have the desire. So the mindset is a desire. So he said 99% of your success is desire. In other words, your desire to want to learn, improve, and run a business. And he said also, one of the other great things you need to do is become part of associations that can help you. And he specifically pointed out OOIDA as the association that can help an owner-operator. And so I loved it because Alan is a great representative to this marketplace and, to truckers are. And the interesting thing is he just got the award, I think yesterday, which was Monday, but he's retiring from the industry in April. So what a great pinnacle, what a great, flag on the ground for a great career.
That's awesome. Brent, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot, Beth. Appreciate what you guys did.
That was Brent Hutto with Truck Stop. Mark, back to you.
Thanks, Ashley. That's our program for today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us.
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit ooida.com.